Hey y'all, Melissa here at Twin Oaks Family Farm. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. And this video is our farm chat number 2. We're picking up off of farm chat number 1, kind of springboarding off of that because we had some great feedback from that video in the comment thread. Want to shout out to those folks that had sent some feedback in like within the first 12 hours or so of that video being uploaded. Small farming, big gross profits, small net profits. I asserted there's not much money in small farming, not big money to be made in small farming. There's a lot of gross profit to be generated, a lot of cash flow to be generated, but when you translate that down to net profit, to clear profit margin at the end of the formulas after all the numbers are run, my assertion in that farm chat number 1 was there's not big money in small farming. So had some great feedback and insights on that. Also had some great feedback from those folks on what the climate is like where they are, and it was really interesting because from 3 different places, pretty geographically spread out: Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, and we're in Ohio. Granted, that's all like the eastern United States, but interestingly, for end of June 2025, like 90s, humidity, storm coming in, we were basically all dealing with the same weather scenario, and that was in 4 different states, really spread out: Ohio, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Florida. So that was interesting. So I appreciate all the input from you folks. We'll get to shout out to you, but we do want to pick up farm chat 2 from that farm chat 1. We'll put a link in the description for farm chat 1 in case you missed that video. In our small family farm operation here at our home place, it is small egg production flock, like 60 chickens laying eggs. This year's meat production number is 1,400 birds. Last year was 1,600 birds. We have a few other income streams for the farm. One of them is well checks on animals off-site. Another income stream is YouTube. So another income stream is sometimes live animals, if we're rehoming hens, or if we take a portion of the meat birds and try to sell them ready to butcher birds. So a few different income streams, and we're actually trying to shift to some new income streams and trying to expand some of the low overhead income streams, and that's why we're talking about going forward scaling totally out of meat birds for sure, because it's a very high overhead part of the farm, very high expense income stream. And the egg birds, we basically were talking about scaling out of as well. Now the egg birds are actually a very low overhead, high profit income stream. So they're kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other to keep or remove from our farm operation. And when we're only keeping egg production hens at the scale of about 60 egg layers, that's not a big scale. So even though you're going to have a high profit margin percentage, it's not going to be a big amount of money. So the premise of that farm chat number 1 was basically sharing with y'all that our second flock of 2025 of meat birds specifically was raised from April 30th to June 11th. We spent $5,700 with that flock. The income projection is big enough to cover the expenses and give a profit margin. A lot of our viewers already know a lot of this terminology, but if you're new to kind of that financial terminology side of it, those are some things. If you're getting into even a small farming operation, you want to familiarize with those things, like, know what net profit is, know what gross profit is, know what overhead is, know what profit and loss is. And I'm learning as I go. And all the things that I learn in other aspects of my life, I can bring into the farm office work and the farm documentation and apply it here too. But when we talk about profit, we have to be pretty precise about what we're talking about. So I wasn't thoroughly clear in the first video with delineating, what kind of profit are we talking about. But part of what I had asserted in the first video was that, so we're going to make, you know, a really small profit margin off of flock 2. I was really just sharing the cost of that. It cost a total of like $5,750 or something. When we're selling them, we're trying to recoup that plus gain a little ahead in that gross profit, all the money that comes in. But when we start running the numbers and we take out the production overhead, those production costs, that's going to leave us with the net profit, which on that particular flock may be about $2,000. But if we've sustained other loss during the fiscal year or during the calendar year, however you run your documenting, and so that's another set of terms you'll want to know, like calendar year versus fiscal year. Are you going to line them up, make them the same? We make them the same for the farm operation. But even if you make $1,500, $2,000 over here, you know, on one flock of meat birds or on one income stream in the operation, if you had to absorb some other kind of loss over here on an earlier flock or in a different income stream, when we take the whole entire farm operation overall, we're going to put all that together. So something that has a really high profit margin, clear net profit margin, is going to absorb loss from something that might have a really, really low net profit margin or might have come in at a loss earlier in the quarter or earlier in the year. That's going to go into any profit you make. All is like a big puzzle, and there's a lot of pieces to it. But some of the feedback from Farm Chat 1 want to share. So great feedback from Buck in Oklahoma. Shout out to you. Thank you for supporting our channel. Thank you for commenting. Appreciate it. Shout out to Debbie in Florida. She's at Mother Clucker's Chicken Farm, so you can actually check that out on YouTube, especially if you're a chicken enthusiast. You'll want to go check that channel out. Mother Clucker's Chicken Farm, Debbie in Florida. And we also had feedback from Steve and Deb in East Tennessee, and they actually raise meat birds as well. So they are real familiar with the commercial poultry production side of it. Mentioned Buck in Oklahoma. He's real familiar with agriculture production, and his feedback was specific to egg chickens, but I think Buck is familiar with other aspects of production agriculture as well, but I'll be able to speak to what he shared about egg production here. So to Buck, to Debbie, to Deb, and Steve, thank you, all of you. You're constant supporters of the channel. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for your comments specifically on Farm Chat number 1. It was really helpful. It was really interactive and really contributed to that video. So the one feedback to us from Buck was that we got to be doing something wrong. But at one point in the video, I had shared that here we are at the end of June 2025, end of the second quarter for us for the farm operation for the year, and we are at a net profit on the entire farm operation of $18. Okay, so I also mentioned, like, I'm glad we're not in the negative. I'm glad we're not in the loss column. I'm happy that it's in the profit, even though it's a teeny tiny profit. We've spent a lot of money in the first 6 months. We've put a lot of work in, and the net profit margin is very small. The farm operation has had the cash flow and has had the gross profit margin to pay the expenses. Covered everything, still is operating not in the negative, in the positive. So a lot of things are going right because we're making an excellent product, we're keeping it affordable for our clients, and the operation has paid for itself. So that's why I responded to Buck with really a lot of things are going right. Because when we look at it, there's really only 2 things about our operation, maybe 3 things about our operation that we could really change that could really impact profit. So like if you're in a farm operation and you find yourself in that situation, okay, profit margin isn't where we want it to be. So there's kind of like 3 generalities that I think could apply across the board, and then you would specialize it in for whatever your niche is or for whatever your production stream is. But in general, you know, what could you change? Okay, well, you could contract out less and do more of the operation yourself. So in our case, what would that be? The processing for the meat birds. For us, with raising meat birds and choosing to contract the processing out, it costs as much to have the birds processed usually as it had cost to raise them from start to finish. So our total farm cost, basically, even with all the income streams figured in, about 50%, 45 to 50% of our total overhead is processing. How could I increase profit margin by minimizing overhead? You would start with your expense categories, and you would start with your biggest ones, and you could see, okay, instead of contracting that out, can we do that on farm? We don't want to, so we contract it out. But also in contracting it out, even though we increase our cost, we also add value to the product at the same time. So and that's really the situation we're in right now. Like, the threshold of what we can still make over what it costs to add that value, we could process the birds ourselves. Well, we're not going to do that. So that's not going to change. Okay. So what's another thing you could do if you're in a small farm operation to increase profits? You could raise your prices. We could raise our prices. We really could raise our prices. We are still selling farm fresh eggs for $3 a dozen. We've never changed it. Even now, I know that most places around here where we are in Southeast Ohio, it's reasonable for people to charge $5 to $7 for farm fresh eggs. The market is supporting that. People are willing to pay it. But again, I don't want to raise the prices on the eggs. I like selling them at $3. Our expenses on egg production chickens haven't gone up for me to justify raising the prices on eggs. Now, I could raise the prices on eggs and build in higher profit margin there that would absorb lower profit margin net from other income streams, but we just don't want to raise the price. On our meat, we're already charging enough to cover expenses and make a very small profit margin. Again, we want people to experience farm-raised, top quality, wholesome poultry. We don't want to price it out of people being able to get it. It's already way more than the price they would pay at a grocery store, but it's also not grocery store chicken. It's farm-raised chicken. So we do have a higher price point than you would find at a grocery store, but we want to keep it affordable. So there's again an instance where we could raise the price. We want people to access it. We want people to experience it. We want people to enjoy it. The third way maybe you could increase some profit margin net is to scale up, to just keep doing the same things you're doing, but do it on a bigger scale. It's not that the process changes, but what we found, even going from, say, flocks of 100 to flocks of 400, or going from raising 500 meat chickens annually to raising 1,200 plus meat chickens annually, what we found is that every time you scale up, you can bulk up how you buy inputs. And when you bulk up how you buy inputs, typically the price per goes down. You start to bring down your relative production cost, but your true real production cost is really climbing because you're scaling way up. So exponentially, you're increasing how much you're buying, but your per bird price, per pound price of feed, per bird price to process, per bag of bedding price to put bedding material on the floor, all those relative per item prices might be decreasing. But you got to keep in mind, even though you're relatively decreasing the per item cost, you have to have more cash flow to upfront the expense. So yes, we could scale up, but there again, we don't want to scale up. So as far as us and our small farm operation, we are reconciled to, and we would either need to raise prices, or we would need to contract out less of the professional services, or we would need to scale up considerably. We don't want to do any of those things. So we just have to make peace with, okay, that's our choice. That's our choice. But if we wanted to stay in those income streams, we would need to do that. So I did think it was great feedback that Buck shared, that they sell $20,000 of eggs a year and 50% of that is profit. So that's really great. That's a really great profit margin off of egg production. And so congrats to Buck and that operation. You have a great operation going, and really always glad to hear producers say things are going good. We're making a good amount of money off of this. The profit margin is good for us. We're satisfied with it. Always want to hear that. We want to see so much support from consumers for farmers that we hear more and more farmers saying, I'm making $20,000 off of this annually and half of it is profit. That's fantastic. So that's at a pretty big scale, much bigger scale than we're at. And I found that really interesting because also in our operation, if we just delineate it out to egg production, the profit margin on egg production here is also very, very good. We don't have very much input cost into the egg production operation, and we have a nice high profit margin from it, but we're only doing it at a scale of like 60 hens. So we're not selling $20,000 worth of eggs and getting, you know, $10,000 worth of profit. But I think that's wonderful, and I appreciated Buck sharing that. And so what we get into with our egg production operation, you know, yes, it's making pretty good income stream and it's making pretty good profit margin, but at the same time it's absorbing some of the loss that might happen over on the meat bird side. Or if the meat bird side is just breaking even, we're putting a lot of work into the meat bird side for just break even. For example, flock 1 from 2025, because we had what I considered a high flock loss in that flock. We had a lot of chill stress in that flock of meat birds because it was early in the calendar year. We were dealing with the climate, had a lot of flock loss, and basically the birds that died in flock loss were the profit margin in that flock. So it was totally a break-even flock in flock 1 of 2025 for us in the meat birds. But because we had the egg chickens, actually quarter 1 ended with a profit as well. And then when we're finishing month 6 for quarter 2, we've had enough sales from the meat birds for flock 2 of 2025 that those sales are pulling up our profit margin. So, you know, it's pretty fluid, like a lot of moving pieces, but I appreciated that, you know, that Buck was sharing that with us. And so that is something to keep in mind when you're in a farm operation. It matters a lot what your income stream is in terms of how is it going to impact your cash flow, how's it going to impact the overhead expenses, how's it going to impact the net profit when it's all said and done. So if you were trying to choose between, do I want to raise meat chickens or do I want to raise egg chickens, and my priority is profit margin, I would advise you to raise egg chickens. So you can do it with meat chickens, but I think you got to do it on a much bigger scale than we're doing it to be able to tip that threshold toward the profit margin side outweighing the overhead side. But a big consideration in the profit margin, and we want to focus on really net profit margin, you know, because gross profit margin, you're gonna do these farm enterprises, you're gonna bring a lot of cash flow in. You're gonna bring a lot of cash flow in. There's gonna be a lot of money moving. There's gonna be a lot of money going out, and there's gonna be a lot of money coming in. But at the end of the day, it's not really about how much money came in, because that could be being offset with how much money went out. It's really about how much is left from what came in after we consider what all went out, which, you know, as Buck shared with the egg example, bringing in 20,000, there's still 10,000 left when it's all said and done. That's good. That's, you know, that's a thumbs up. Now, I don't know what else is in Buck's operation, but, you know, to make that a living wage, then how much do you have to scale that up? Do you have to take that what we're doing to get $20,000 cash flow with $10,000 profit margin, do we quadruple that to scale that up to a living wage, you know, or the other income streams involved there. So it has more to do with, like Buck was pointing out in that example, what's left when we take the expenses out, than it has to do with how much is coming in. So you know, for all of us that are engaged in, especially farm businesses, but any kind of for-profit enterprise, you know, gross profit is everything that comes in, but net profit is what's left. And that's really what we want to focus on working at increasing, right? So the other things I wanted to mention there, I found it interesting that Deb and Steve shared that their production cost with the birds, I think he said, is usually between $17 and $18, around $17 a bird. And I found that interesting. I don't know for sure what size flocks they're producing at, but I do remember when we raised flocks like of 150 birds or less, that's basically where the production cost was at for us. And we noticed when we increased the flock sizes that we could get production costs down to that like $14 range. Ideally, where we would like to get production costs down to is about $12 a bird. And that's why when you've watched our meat chicken videos, there's times I'll talk about if we could do this in 5 weeks, I would do it in 5 weeks. For one thing, doing it in 5 weeks would take that week off the end, and it might help us contract those production costs just slightly. Also, you have to really limit flock loss when you want to contract production cost in meat birds, so we would have to look at that too. What ways are we going to address reducing flock loss as much as possible? And if you could process the birds on site and are willing to do that, that would definitely help production costs. But like I've said, you know, that's kind of a closed chapter because we don't want to do that, so we're not going to. So it is what it is. But so to Debbie down in Florida at Mother Clucker's Chicken Farm, she mentioned they sell their eggs for $7 a dozen, and that it is a side hustle. And I kind of added to that, responding to Debbie, that, you know, for us, that's really up here at our home place. That's what this farm is, this farm operation. It is a side hustle. And adding to that, it's a side hustle that has a lot of intrinsic satisfaction. We love to produce these great products from production agriculture and give accessibility to other people to experience farm-raised, fresh, wholesome food. There is an intrinsic satisfaction when someone wants our chicken and says this is the best chicken we've ever eaten. There is an intrinsic satisfaction when our clients, almost across the board, our clients will frequently say to us, these are the best eggs I've ever had. There's an intrinsic satisfaction in producing that. There's an intrinsic satisfaction in producing that. So we are not making a living income off of our farm. We have off-farm jobs that are running our household, but our household is not absorbing the farm expense either. So that's where I say, for what we have set up, keeping in perspective that our farm is basically a side hustle, basically a side job, one we pour a whole lot of time, sweat, effort, love, and passion into. But it's a side job, it's a side hustle, but it's one with this intrinsic satisfaction, and we aren't putting personal money into it to sustain it. It is a self-sustaining operation, and that's, for us, that's the bare minimum with the farm. It has to support itself. If it tips to where we're supporting it, it has to go. At this point, it's not costing us to have the farm in operation. We do want to see a greater net profit in order to keep it going, but it is a lot going right with it when it is producing excellent products, and it is helping people experience farm-raised food, and it is raising awareness of production agriculture in a positive way, and it is paying its own way. So those are all good things. But it was a good exchange in the comments from Farm Chat number 1, and we wanted to kind of springboard off of that for Farm Chat number 2, share some thoughts on the different pieces of the puzzle that we see and look at and observe in our farm operation, get y'all's feedback on what you think. And if you're in a farm operation, do you use multiple income streams? If you were going to go into a farm operation, you're not now, but you were going to, what income streams would you look at? Do you think specialization is better than diversification, or do you think diversification is necessary income streams? So let us know some of your thoughts on that, but we'll try to get this one edited and put together and uploaded for Friday. It'll actually come out on Friday, July 4th, but that'll be Farm Chat number 2, and we appreciate all of the feedback and all of the support. So again, shout out to Steve and Deb in Tennessee, shout out to Buck in Oklahoma, and shout out to Debbie at Mother Clucker's Chicken Farm in Florida. We appreciate y'all, and had all responded on Chat 1 within about 12 hours of it having been uploaded, and we appreciate that support. Thank you so much. So since this is supposed to be uploading on July 4th, to all my fellow Americans, happy Independence Day. God bless y'all.